church benches and into the trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm your host, Riley Lowe, and today I want to talk about 5 fatal flaws in transgender ideology. We are at the tail end. We're staring July 4th in the face, so this will be the last. Actually, I think this is going to be published after Pride Month. It'll be published in July, but it's still a good idea to know, because we're just bombarded lately with all the alphabet soup crowd stuff, right? And lately, for years it was just the being gay or lesbian or whatever, and then now it is. The transgender thing is a very, very, very much being pushed. Actually, I thought it was funny, speaking of the gay thing, there was a man, I saw a man on the street interview, right? And so this person was asked about marriage. And they're like, yeah, it's between a man and a woman. And the person asking the question says, well, what about gay people? And the guy goes, oh, I have no problem with a gay man marrying a gay woman. And I was like, that's the perfect answer to that, That's the perfect answer. So, anyway, let's get into this. 5 fatal flaws in transgender ideology. And I actually want to start by something to think about and something I want to put in your mind that I don't see addressed in the arguments, right? I never see addressed, whether it's in the arguments of abortion, whether it's in the arguments of the homosexual and transgender stuff, right? I don't ever see this addressed. So this is what I want to question you about, because, there's a lot, and I'll bring it up later in one of these arguments, but so let's say a police officer shows up on a crime scene, right? Let's say it's a dumpster, right? And there's evidence of a crime, there's blood, and there's like, what is this? It looks like maybe human blood, we don't know. They can swab that, and they can send it to the lab, and they can look at the DNA of that, right? And if they can determine if it's human, they can determine if it's male or female. They can't determine if it's anything else, because there is no third option or fourth option or 71st option or however many there are today. They can tell from your DNA, from the code that God gave you in every single one of your cells, that you are either male or female. Now, one thing it can't do, this is where it could tie into the abortion debate, is it can't tell if you are a 90-year-old man or a zygote, right? Your DNA, because the reason is because your DNA is the same whether you are a zygote, which is just a clump of cells, right? But it is uniquely human clump of cells with unique human DNA, right? That zygote's DNA is not going to match anybody else's DNA. It's not going to match its mom's DNA. It's not part of its mom's body, right? So don't let all that fool you. So that's an argument for another time, but I don't think I've ever seen that argument posed in any kind of formal debate. I've used it being a keyboard warrior, and I've used it a couple times in person when you're in a discussion, and that's like the ultimate thing. The fabric of who you are, your DNA, says that you're either male or female. I see people argue about the chromosomes. Well, guess what? You can have extra chromosomes or lacking chromosomes. That can get messed up. Now, but your DNA, is going to tell you whether you are male or female, and if you're human or not human, right? All right, so let's get into this. 5 fatal flaws in transgender ideology. Now, I came across this list, and it's a great list. This is why I'm sharing it with you, from Cross-Examined. That's Frank Turek's group, right? Cross-Examined with a D on the end of it, all right? And they are specialized in apologetics. Basically, apologetics, you're using logic to prove things, logic to show evidence, right? And it's evidence-based. And now logic is evidence, right? One thing people always scream is, what about the science? Well, science can't do anything without philosophy. Right? There's rules in philosophy. There's in the science, the philosophy is the pillars that hold up science. Science does not exist without philosophy. It just doesn't. So let's look at this. Number 1. So what this is a list of things that counter common arguments, right? When it says 5 fatal flaws, all right? These are 5 things that make it impossible for transgenderism to exist, essentially. Number 1, the design of the body proves there are only 2 genders. One of the designs, what this doesn't say, is things that are designed, is that DNA that I just told you about. So this is talking about there is no reproductive output in humans or mammals. Of course, there are humans who cannot produce, either due to biological deficiencies, but that is an incapacity, not a third capacity to produce something else. In other words, what's that saying is that there are only 2 genders. 2 of the same kind, there's no third reproductive output. Right? You can only have a male and a female. When they get together and they can sexually reproduce, you get more people. That's just the way it is. You can't have 2 women, 2 females, DNA 2 females, DNA 2 males. That doesn't work. You can't work. The plumbing's not there for one thing, but there's a lot of other things. It just doesn't. You can't reproduce that way. Like I've seen articles, right? I haven't read the articles, but I've seen some headlines recently talking about, this famous person and their significant other that are both the same sex welcome their new baby. They're trying to make it sound like that 2 females got together and had a female or had a baby where it's half of one parent, half of the other got together. That just doesn't happen. Or 2 males get together and they've got a baby. I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. Number 2, transgenderism must presuppose fixed genders. Now this I love this. If I'm a biological man, but I think I'm a woman, I must have some idea of what a man and woman are to recognize my problem, right? I must also know what a man and woman are to make the so-called transition, all right? In order to transition from one to the other, you're saying that there is only one or the other. It's as simple as that. To say that you are not one and you are the other means that there is only one or the other. Pretty simple. Number 3, you can change your mind, but not your biology. And that's very true. When biology and psychology are mismatched, why do we think changing the body instead of changing the mind is the way to fix the problem? We don't do this for other conditions, right? If somebody is anorexic, we don't say we need to ensure we do everything possible physically to give them surgeries and whatnot to malnourish them so that we can conform their anorexia to their psychological condition. We don't do that. We just don't, right? If somebody thinks that they, the example I've heard is if my daughter came to me and said, "Daddy, I think I'm a pirate." I'm not going to go schedule a surgery to get her leg amputated and a peg leg installed to get her eye gouged out and an eye patch. That's just not the way it's going to work, right? It's self-evident there. When biology and psychology are mismatched, why do we think changing the body instead of changing the mind is the way to fix the problem? We don't do this for other conditions. It's very true. Sex is not, or gender is not assigned at birth. All right. It's not like people vote at gender reveal parties or that doctors arbitrarily decide the sex of a newborn. They discover the baby's sex because they discover and state the baby's sex or gender because there is no ambiguity. So what happens, and this will lead into an argument here. So you're going to want to pay attention here. What happens is, now there's sometimes the ultrasounds and sonograms are wrong. Sometimes it's like, oh, we're preparing for a baby girl. Oh, the baby boy come out. Well, how do you know a baby boy come out? Well, it's self-evident. Okay? It's self-evident. Or we think it's a baby boy. We're preparing, we're buying stuff for a baby boy, and a baby girl comes out. Well, how do you know it's a baby girl? Look at it. It's a baby girl. Now, this leads us and begs the question of what about, I don't even know what they call them now. They used to call them hermaphrodites or things like that. There's rare, it is extremely rare, genetic conditions where people are born with both sex organs. Okay, a baby pops out, it's got both reproductive organs. Now we do live, and people say, "Oh, well, see, you got to pick one or the other. You're assigning it." Well, what did I tell you at the beginning of this podcast? We live in a day and age where you could take the DNA before you start chopping and whacking things off there or changing the baby's body. We have the ability now to take a drop of blood or hair follicle or whatever, take it over to a lab and say, is this from a male or a female? Problem solved. Problem solved. That argument does not exist any longer. Now, the side that is for transgenderism will still use that argument. Now, I would always, to me, the DNA argument, it trumps it all. It trumps it all. But like I said, I don't ever see people use the DNA argument. I do not know why, because to me, it is the ultimate argument. And then there is no basis, this is number 5, there's no basis for transgender rights. There's just not. We seem to be inventing new rights in America every 10 minutes. But where do rights come from? Right? Where do the rights that are spelled out in our Constitution, in our Declaration of Independence, where do these rights come from? It states that they come from nature's God. Okay, they come from God. Rights they come from God, not from government, not from society, not from anything else. The rights, by definition, they come from God. So without God, every moral issue is reduced to a matter of opinion. If they were to say, well, these rights and that rights and those rights, you say, where do they come from? And I say, well, this is just a society thing. And you say, well, why did all those people have to die trying to defeat Hitler and the Nazis? Why did we try to do that? Were they right or were they wrong? I'd say, well, they were wrong. Okay, well, Hitler obviously thought he was right, or he wouldn't be going that route. So if he's right, then where do these rights come from, right? If Jewish people don't have human rights in one culture, then why would we want to impose our culture on that culture? Yeah. Why? Without God, there is no, this is the moral dilemma. Because you have to have a standard beyond yourself, or else it's just a matter of opinion. I believe C.S. Lewis put it this way. I believe it was a Mere Christianity. He said, that he was taught. He was one of the things that he got hung up on before he became a Christian was the thought of evil in the world. Right? There's so much evil in the world. The way he puts it is, I would have no idea that a stick is crooked unless I knew what a straight, I think it was maybe, or line, I think he put it line. I would have no idea of what a crooked line was unless I knew what a straight line was. The standard is a straight line, and then that's how you know that this one's crooked, because you're comparing it to the standard. It's the same way with things that are wrong. You say, oh, well, morality is relative, right? It's all comes out of culture and evolution and just society. That's how we decide what's right and wrong. Okay, you can say that, but if somebody comes up and punches you in the face right then, punches that person in the face right then, they would say that's wrong. You say, well, why? But that person, what if they don't think it's wrong? Well, the whole thing changes whenever it affects you, right? It just does. And maybe I'll go into I think I've done something on the moral argument before for God. I need to go back over that. The great example, it was so good. The example I heard I think is awesome is kind of I don't know, it's not a gotcha question, really. It's just a legitimate question. So if your car broke down in a bad part of town at 11 o'clock at night, and you get out, and all of a sudden there's 10 young men come out of a dark alley, and they're headed your direction, would you or would you not be relieved to learn that they just came from a Bible study? I know it's a hypothetical question, but it's a great hypothetical question, because whether you're an atheist, no matter what your religion is, you would be relieved that those young men just came from a Bible study, because you know that their moral standard is not going to be to attack you, not going to be to hurt you, that they're accountable to God. They're not just making up their own things as they go. So I guess I want to conclude this by basically saying that transgenderism doesn't exist, right? And there's what amazes me now is you'll see there's videos and clips and articles about it's awful. There's forced sterilization. These surgeries are not reversible. You could say they're reversible, but you got little girls that are going in, and doctors that are supposed to be doing no harm. They're performing surgeries, removing breasts, and changing things about other body parts. Giving them hysterectomies and everything else because they think that they're little boys, and it's happening. And there's chemical sterilization that's being performed on both sides of this, boys and girls. And that's irreversible. It's irreversible. I personally, I think it's a plan to lower the population, but who knows? Anyway, but transgenderism doesn't exist, and that is 5 fatal flaws of transgenderism. Have a blessed day.